you wanted to listen to any type of rhythm and blues or any music not played on any of the mainstream stations, pretty much had to listen to WLAC in the evenings. That included John R. Show and Hoss Allen and Gene Nobles and others.
When I got off that elevator, that lobby was full of news people, television folk. They was all in there. I said, daggone, what the devil's going on? And they had me sit down at this table, and they just started interviewing me, you know, asking me questions about my schooling and where I come from and all that. The next day, that evening paper, right up to Don Whitehead, student at Tennessee State University, signs with WLAC radio as a newscaster. And I tell you the truth, I was flabbergasted. I tell you, I didn't know what to think. All of my friends, they just didn't know what to think.
I know why. I would have had a press conference if I'd hired Don Whitehead in 1968. It's news. It's huge news. It's sticking your neck out in front of everybody and going, guess what we're gonna do?
I was born in Richmond, Indiana, small town, and there's about, I say 20% black, 80% Caucasian. We went to school together as black and white, and we enjoyed playing ball together and these things at school. But the funny thing, when school was over with, we were on one side of town and the Caucasians were on the other side of town. White folks had a swimming area way out across town, but we weren't allowed to swim there. Weren't allowed to come in that place. We ended up swimming in the river. We found our own little swimming pool out in the river, and it came up to your knee. That's how deep the water was. So we named it Knee Deep. They had places to go eat, restaurants, but blacks were not allowed. And I remember this one place not far from school, junior high school, and we would stop there, and we liked the tenderloins, but you had to knock on the back door window. They would open up the window and you can order a tenderloin, but you couldn't go inside. And for some reason or another, though, black folks in my hometown and all up across the north, they thought they were living a better life than the blacks in the South. 5th grade, my oldest sister took me to a school performance play. And I'm sitting in there watching this performance, and I tell you, that just got a hold of me. And I was so excited to see those folks up there talking and acting, and I'll tell you, I just enjoyed that so much I didn't know what to do. So I started writing these little plays and things at home and at the community center. And I would write these plays, and I had a friend of mine, and he became the director. And I would write these plays, and he would direct it. And the community, they were coming to the plays. One of the actors came back behind the stage at this community center, and said, somebody wants to see you. I went down and met with Ms. Smith at the office. And she said, you know, I called Tennessee State and talked to Dr. Poe, who taught me, and told him about you. And I want you to go to Tennessee State. In fact, she said, hold on a minute. And she dialed Tennessee State and got Dr. Poe on the phone. And had me talk with Dr. Poe, and he said, I hear that you writing plays up there. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, you need to come down here and go to school here and learn more about the theater. Somebody said, yeah, you go down there. You're going to be on the news.
The reaction in Nashville, the culture in Nashville in the 1960s about civil rights depends on where you were and what you were doing. Nashville's a typical southern town.
I just don't know about Tennessee. Don't know about Tennessee. I've never been south. Don't know about Tennessee. I got everything together. I had an old Ford car. I packed up in that car and I took off down to Tennessee. On the way, I kept thinking, am I making the right move? And that drive, I didn't drive by myself. I was driving by all my thoughts. I got on that campus, and all the students that I saw, all black students, I just kept looking. It was amazing. I had never seen anything like it. I got my place to stay, and I paid a month's rent. And then when I started to register in school, I was $50 short. I went to Dean Payne and sat down and told him a story, and that I was short $50, and he told me that if you didn't have enough money to come to school, you shouldn't have come down here. So my thought said, well, why don't you go to a bank? I walked in that bank. The lady says, can I help you? I said, yes. I said, I'm here to see the president of the bank. And Mr. Benedict came out, and he asked me, he says, so you going to start school? I said, yes, sir. I'm getting ready to start school. It's my first year. And he told the guy who came in there, he said, look, take him downstairs and make him out a 90-day loan. Went back to school, and I registered.
I met Don Whitehead in 1967 when I came to TSU as a freshman. Don was a senior here. And it was really funny because when you came to TSU as a freshman in theater, you were treated really bad. That's how they broke you in. But Don was like our big brother. He was the big brother. He was a senior. He wasn't supposed to be nice to us, but he was.
I did get a chance to talk with Louis Armstrong. I sneaked down to the place where he was performing, and he came out the back. I stopped him and I told him who I was, and he sitting in a limousine and had me sitting in a limousine with him. I asked him, I said, tell me, how is it? How do you do your job? I said, what's it like? And he told me, he said, you know, he said, I had to go to the back door to perform. I couldn't come through the front door. I had to come in the back door. And I said, how'd that make you feel? I said, make you feel less human to have to do that? He said, no. He said, you know, son, said, I had to make a living. And blowing this horn is my living. Sitting at the counters, we did that as students. That's what we did in school. We'd load up and go up to Fisk, pick up students at Fisk, crowd, now, big crowd of us, and walking downtown in Nashville and sit in. And kids are getting arrested and going to jail. But that's what was going on back then. That's what we did. Dr. Poe called me in his office and said, I just talked with a gentleman down at WLAC radio. They want you to come there. They want you to send somebody to talk to them about doing some news. And that's when I said, well, Doc, we never did study the news, and I don't know anything about the news. He said, go down there and talk to them anyway. Back in those days when an older person tells you to do a thing, you just about had to do it. You just couldn't just turn your back on it. You had to do it. I went down there to that station. They had about 4 or 5 people there for me to talk with. They tell me all what they'd like for me to do and all that. To broadcast the news every night. So I told them, I said, well, I appreciate you all. I appreciate you all, and I appreciate coming down here to the station. I said, but I have plans to go to New York and get into a theater. I said, that's my field, theater. And you know, they didn't say, thanks for coming. They said, we want you to go back to school and think about it.
Somebody, Blackie called somebody at TSU and said, we want one of your guys to come be on our radio station.
They got with Dr. Poe. And I went back down there and talked to those guys again, told them the same thing. You know, I told them, I said, I studied 5 years in theater, and I got to get into theater. That's my field. And I'm not a news person. I don't know anything about news. Same thing happened again. Think about it.
So you have a group of community leaders, one of them being E.G. Blackman, and the race relations are pretty atrocious at the time, and they wanted to be part of the solution.
I had to go back down there. And this time, the third time, I said, okay, I'll take the position. Thursday, we want you to come back for a press conference. And Mr. Ward, the president, told me, he said, Don, he said, wear a tie when you come back.
That they were also groundbreaking in the fact that they hired Don Whitehead, a young African-American, person who just graduated, from Tennessee State University to be a news announcer.
I went back down there. I didn't know what's going on. When I got off that elevator, that lobby was full of news people, television folk. They was all in there. I said, daggone, what the devil's going on? And they had me sit down at this table, and they just started interviewing me, asking me questions about my schooling and where I come from and all that. The next day, that evening paper, oh my goodness. Picture of me in the paper, and right up to Don Whitehead student at Tennessee State University, signs with WLAC radio as a newscaster.
In many ways, you can think of WLAC as like the nation's first national R&B station in many ways, because they had 50,000 watts, beaming across the stratosphere, reaching half the country, reaching up into Canada, reaching down into Jamaica. And it made those DJs, so influential. I mean, they were some of the first DJs to kind of build their own rapport with an audience.
Hey, John R., what you gonna do? Come on, John R., man, and play with some rhythm and blues.
Hey, everybody. John R., way down south here in the middle of Dixie. I'm back on the scene, and I'm back with Ernest. You ready for that? Tell you what we got. You got that little piece of paper I sent along with this record. Tells you all about all these albums we want to talk about. Great values, friends. Albums that you can get from Ernie's and save a lot of money. Ernie's Record Mart, the one and only, located right here in Nashville, Tennessee, and nowhere else but Nashville. All right? Okay, let's get on with the thing here.
Artists like James Brown were, stopping by the station, to meet the DJs and talk to the DJs and give them their new record to play.
Everybody's favorite, Little Richard. Come in, man.
Slipping on a sliding Gene Noble with that good word on Royal Crown hairdressing. Everywhere I go, and I goes just about everywhere, the girls are really gone on Royal Crown hairdressing. Even old Long Tall Sally use it. You know something, Gene? I goes for the girls with that Royal Crown look, cause man, she's got it.
Not only at nighttime did they have this, 50,000 watts going, but they were also picked up by the CBS network. As soon as it got picked up by a network, I mean, it just, amplified everything in a major way. And so for Don Whitehead to get hired there in 1968, that's just major. As far as I know, he may have been the most influential African-American news announcer of his day.
As I look back on it, it seemed like, I don't know that I had a reaction that this was a black man on WLAC. There was a time when I didn't know Hoss was white, okay? Seriously.
I was told by Jim Warden, the news director at WLAC when I first started, that they wanted me to go to broadcasting school for about 2 weeks. I was taught about the microphones and operations of the microphone and talking on the microphone. I was taught all that in 2 weeks' time. I went on and got started at WLAC radio, CBS. And really what got me was when they told me that when I broadcast the evening news, that I'll be talking to over 18 million people. The first day on the news, the first newscast, I was so nervous. I wasn't telling the news. I'm reading the news. I'm reading the news. I wasn't telling the news. I'm reading it. And I'm telling you, I'm reading and forgot to turn the mic on. I was so scared I didn't even flip the mic on. I just started reading. And the house man got up there. He got up, ran around there, and reached over my shoulder and flipped the mic on. And I kept on reading. I didn't stop.
Being a CBS affiliate and having a 50,000 watt clear channel, beam, I mean, it was just bouncing all over the stratosphere. It was blanketing half of the nation, the eastern part of the country and the Midwest. There are stories of, people picking the station up in Canada, down in the Caribbean with, in Jamaica. You know, there people were hearing it there. There's a story that there's a recording studio in Jamaica that called itself Randy's because of the sponsor, Randy's Record Shop.
I came in at 6 o'clock in the evening. I came in and got myself ready for the 8 o'clock news. And I just got nervous, and I just started getting, my stomach would cramp up, and all 18 million people was looking at me. Not only 18 million people I'm thinking about now, I'm thinking about my dad and my family. They could hear me. The janitor, an older man, and that guy, every hour on the hour when I get ready to do the news, he would come up to the window and he would look in the window and watch me do the news. And I didn't think much about that. But when I finished the news, he would smile and wave and go on back to his work. I didn't think much about that. But years later, I thought about it. I said, he was proud. He was proud.
All of my friends listen to WLAC. But if you wanted to really listen to soul, particularly at night, you had to listen to WLAC. And I think because of that, not only on the music side, but on the news side, as we're discussing the events of civil rights, the unrest, the sit-ins, the boycotts, that's happening around us. So here you have this one guy that's doing the news on LAC. Is that major? Absolutely.
Being an African American in the station working, and I was the only one there, but the janitors were there. They were black. I had the guys that broadcast with me at night, Gene, John, Haas, and Herman, all of them gathered around me and start helping me, pushing me along, and giving me the necessary information that I needed to be a broadcaster. I got called to a fire. And when I got there, firemen and everybody was in there, got the fire out and everything. And just soon after that started, trucks were there, and I pulled up and got there, and I walked up to the house, and one of the pharmacists said, "Look here, now be careful when you go in." Said there's a couple kids in there on the floor, so be careful when you go in through the door. I walked in there, and 3 little kids, about 1, 2, and 4, about 4 or 5 years old. 3 of them were dead on the floor by the door, and the coroner hadn't got there yet. I turned around and went back and sat down on the back of that truck. I cried like a baby. One of the firemen came and said, "Don, you all right, man?" I said, "Oh, man." Found out that the mother had locked the kids up in the house, and she'd gone to a club, and the house caught on fire and smoke. Kids couldn't get out because it was locked up. But my story was that kids lost their lives in a house fire. And, that was it. I didn't go into the mother. I don't do that. I just said kids got lost in a fire. I feel that, the mother's already hurting. she's going through it. I don't need to talk about what she did and what she didn't do and all that. The news was the kids died in the fire. So that's the story that I put in for the morning news.
My father said this was my cohort, and he said we do everything together. I remember my father kind of taking him under his wing and nurturing him and just kind of helping him along.
My mother, who did not trust my dad as far as she could throw him, trusted Don Whitehead. She could get mad at Don Whitehead, and so could my grandmother get mad at Don Whitehead, and he'd say, "Oh, you're going to get me in such trouble with them. They're going to kill me." But my mother knew that this was somebody that really loved my dad and was not going to take advantage of him. Didn't want his money. Didn't want anything out of him. That was just his friend. Daddy needed a pal. He needed somebody to, kind of get him from point A to point B sometimes.
And they called Hoss into the office and called me into the office. And they sat down with Hoss and me and told Hoss, don't you when you leave the station, don't you take Don with you nowhere. I didn't know what was going on. And they said, and Don, don't you go nowhere with Hoss.
When my dad would go do radio conferences or DJ conferences or speak at, whether it be churches or other institutions around the South, Don would drive him, so they'd take off on the road together. So they were a team. On
a Saturday night, and Hoss said, "Hey, I got Mama's car." His mother had a Cadillac car, man, a nice Cadillac, Hoss would get there once in a while. E.G., my nighttime boss, called me into the office, told me that we got a lot of burning going on in this city, across the country, and it's just awful since Martin Luther King has been assassinated. They're burning these cities, they're burning these homes, burning these businesses, and there's just a lot of chaos going on, rioting all over the place. So we want you to travel to the schools across the country, broadcast from the schools. He says you got a lot of power to broadcast this information. We're going to send you out on these trips. And the first trip that he decided that he's going to send me was Jackson State College, Jackson, Mississippi. I'd like to die. I didn't want to go to Nashville. Now I'm getting ready to go to Mississippi? Come on. I'd like to have died. I didn't know Hoss was not religious. He was playing the gospel. So I felt like he was pretty well religious, So at night I told Hoss, I said, Hoss, you know what? I said, they may send me to Mississippi. Black man gonna send me to Mississippi. I said, Hoss, will you pray for me? I'll say, yes, I'll pray for you. I tell you, the day I got ready to leave, the night before I was going to leave, I said, Hoss, I'm leaving tomorrow. I said, did you pray for me? Yeah, I prayed for you. I said, yeah. He said, yeah. The good Lord told me to tell you that he'd go with you to Memphis. And when you leave Memphis, you're on your own.
Remember, he had to go down to Mississippi, and he was scared.
I cannot imagine what was going through Don's mind at the time that WLAC sent him out.
Somebody told him they're sending him on assignment around the South to the various civil rights thing, and I can remember having conversations with friends about, I'm not sure I would have taken that job. Black people especially were targets. This wasn't, I'm the sheriff, and the minute they step out of line, I'm going to arrest them. This was in Mississippi and Georgia and other places I was familiar with. This was the sheriff and the Ku Klux Klan and the governor and the mayor conspiring together in advance to say, we're going to hurt some of these people. I can't imagine where he would have stayed or where he would have eaten on assignment in a place like Mississippi or Louisiana. I mean, there was no place he could, with safety, stay, eat, be seen, etc. So to have a job of going and finding people and, sticking a microphone in their face, he had to have immense courage. He really did.
Leaving in a WLAC car, station wagon. I'm driving to Memphis and to Mississippi in that station wagon. And I tell you, I thought about everything that I could think about driving down that highway. Thought about them 3 boys who were killed down there in that swamp. Thought about the lady from Detroit that came down and they killed her. I'm thinking about everything, and I'm driving down through there. I got to Jackson, Mississippi. I met the public relations director at the school, and he got me set up for my interviews to all the important people at the school. I didn't go to the service station by myself. I had one of the school officials to take me to the service station to get gas. I wasn't even going to go in there by myself because I didn't want to think I'm down there causing trouble. I was scheduled to go to Grambling. I went to leave for Grambling that morning. One of the fellows at school, I was getting ready to leave, said, "Hey, don't you know what's tornado? A tornado just came through here, and we heard that it wiped out, just about wiped out Yazoo City." I said, "Well, I'm on my way to Grambling." So he said, "Well, you gonna be going that way? You gonna be going through that way?" State trooper was standing out there as you go in. And I said, "Oh my God." Then I got thinking, I said, I wonder if he was at that shootout at Jackson State. I pulled up to him, and he came over to the car, and I showed him my news badge, and I told him who I was. So I want to know if he would give me some assistance to go in and talk to some people. He said, "Follow me." And I got there, and a group of men were talking. And I stand there listening to them talking about something, This guy was telling them about this N person, using the N word, just like conversation. Helped me get my wife out from under the house. And we got her to the hospital. He was talking about this. But just using that N word just like conversation, wasn't nothing to it. I went down there to the sheriff's office. I tell you, I walked in there. He looked at me. He looked at me. And when I got to his desk, "Yeah?" I said, I showed him my badge. I said, told him who I was. I said, "I'm Don Whitehead from Nashville, WLAC CBS. I said, I'm just passing through. And I heard about this tornado. So I come in here to get some information to put on the news." He looked at me. He said, "A tornado just come in here a couple hours ago." And I look up and here you come.
He had to have all the insignia that identified him as a target. Terrified. I can't imagine having to do my job, being able to do my job under those kind of circumstances.
And I think more than anything, It's not that he broke the color barrier at LAC and really in the country. I think it's the fact of what he was covering.
Alabama state troopers were stationed all around this building, Foster Auditorium. The auditorium was being used to register students for the summer session at the University of Alabama. 2 of them were Negroes. The auditorium was also being used as a national stage for George Wallace, the pugnacious governor of Alabama. Wallace, a dedicated segregationist, came here to fulfill a campaign pledge to stand in the schoolhouse door to block the desegregation of any Alabama public school.
George Wallace was the public leader for the nation of the redneck segregationists. He called more press conferences, organized more redneck protests, ran for president twice. In 1962, he ran for governor on a platform of segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and one big.
Now, I had a chance to talk to George Wallace. He had just pulled into Nashville on the airplane, running for president. I said, Governor Wallace, I said, I'd like to have a word too with you. He said, all right? Yeah, go right ahead. Then I asked him, I said, Governor Wallace, I said, if you win the nomination for presidency, I said, what are your plans for the country? And he said, you know, one of my plans is that I'm going to have businesses, big businesses in the South. I'm going to have businesses all across the South where they can hire black people and white people. And when I finished with him, he said, I'm going to have my conference at the auditorium. I'd like for you to come. The conference at night, 1968 at night. I'm going to go down to the auditorium to Governor Wallace's conference. I looked at those trucks and they had rifles in the back windows. I walked in the auditorium. It was packed. It was packed. Wait a minute here. I don't have any business in here.
There were other blacks like Mal Good and others that were doing news in different markets and for ABC. You can pretty much look at LAC in terms of its reach. 37 states, foreign countries. It was almost like a network. And then being a CBS affiliate. It was a big deal to have Don Whitehead reporting not only on civil rights, but on news in general. But to hire this guy and to send him into some of the most dangerous areas of the country is really quite profound. But for me personally, being young and having lost all of these great leaders at the same time, this was a major point in my life.
I know my dad became, in a lot of ways, a lot more proud of working there because of Don Whitehead. Having people like Don Whitehead as a part of a big national force in radio at WLAC made such a difference.
Airplane hijack. That was a constant thing going on back then. Somebody then took an airplane and headed for Cuba or headed to another state, another small country. Hijack. So that went on all the time. And then I would get phone calls from folks that somebody was on that plane akin to them, and that plane's going to Egypt, going someplace, and they called me. They called me to ask whether they're all right. At the airport, look for somebody else, and guess who I ran into down there? Liberace. I said, tell me something right now. Where would you rather have been, instead of piano player. He says, I wanted to be a doctor. But my mother kept being so emphasizing the piano to me and made me play piano. And that's how I come to be a piano. I said, well, you did good. You did good. Our janitor at the station, he was gone for about 2 weeks. And I thought, I thought maybe he's on vacation. I hadn't seen him for 2 weeks. And then the day I saw him, and I said, hey man, how you doing? I said, you had a good vacation? He said, no, I wasn't in no vacation. I was home. I said, I couldn't get around. I had to stay home. I was waiting on my dialysis. I was waiting at Vanderbilt to get my dialysis. I said, yeah? I said, well, how come you didn't go to Meharry? He said, Meharry doesn't have a kidney machine. So on Saturdays, the community of Nashville, on Saturdays, had an all out at car lots, corners, at the traffic corners, and all the traffic that come through, collecting money from Meharry. And this is going on all day on Saturday, every Saturday. And we raised over $20,000 and purchased a kidney machine from Meharry. Now that's a radio reaching out to the people and get something done.
You've got all these old dudes. They're not that old, but you got all these white dudes, and they're sitting at the table, and then you got the black dude standing behind them, and it's like, this is a powerful team. These are some of the most powerful DJs in the country. They can make or break a record. And then here's the newscaster. Here's the only valid person in the whole picture. These guys are all shucking and jiving and God knows what kind of deals they're cutting and this and that, and they're all so cool and hip. And then here's the straight up guy reading the news. And it's Don Whitehead.
Jackie Robinson. He was the first Negro to play Major League Baseball. An aggressive competitor, he asked no quarter and gave none. But he won the admiration of players and fans alike with his skill and daring. From the very first, he made it clear that he wanted to be accepted on the basis of his ability. I came here, he said, to play baseball.
One time I caught Jackie Robinson. I caught Jackie Robinson on a golf course in Nashville. And I interviewed Jackie, and we got to talking about different things. And I asked him, I said, what do you think about the salaries these ball players are getting now versus to what they were paying you all back then? He says, all the money that they can get, I hope that they get every dime that they can get because they're worth it. Didn't come across my mind that he been the first ball player, Major League, and me being first newscaster, black newscaster in him.
When you look at the story of integration in the South and in America, I mean, WLAC plays a major role. I mean, this is a station. I mean, B.B. King, had a quote saying, if some Southerners could have, they probably would have segregated the airwaves, but radio is free. WLAC was reaching black and white audiences. A lot of whites were hearing, R&B and blues, for the first time.
All right, let's see. Let me flap my lips a little bit, then I'll come right on back with another great sound, like music, Now I know you got to have some soul, or you wouldn't be listening to old John R. Because I got me some soul.
As we got on later into the 70s, and we got around 77, you see, and that's when things began to sort of change. Then they called us in the office and had a meeting with us that the station was being sold. Not long after that, they came up with the idea of changing the nighttime to top 40. And when they did that, John Art said he's not playing any top 40 music. So John said, I'm gonna call it quits. So all things fell apart. See, after John left, I left. Hoss stayed. Hoss stayed until he passed away. But the station moved to another place. Hoss stayed with the station. But the station sold more than once during that time. Because when they changed over to the top 40, revenue went down.
I think my father did not realize at the time when Don came to work that they were making history. Everybody, Mick Jagger, Charlie Daniels, whoever, grew up listening to WLAC radio. Everybody knows they all know who Hoss Allen and Gene Nobles and John are, and they know who Don Whitehead is. They all know. It was like this team.
You know, when I look back at it, I guess it's like anything. History was being made, but because we were in the middle of it, we didn't understand that history was being made.